Everyone in town warned Daniel Mercer not to buy the house on Graywell Lane. Some said it was cursed, some said it was haunted, and a few whispered that the last owner simply vanished without packing a single suitcase. But none of them dared to tell him the truth, that the people living closest to the house were more dangerous than anything that had ever happened inside it. Before the story begins, do one thing for me: subscribe, like, and comment so that this story can reach to people that need to hear it. Daniel Mercer needed a fresh start, and the world didn't seem interested in giving him one. He'd left the city after a long cycle of failed jobs, scattered friendships, and the kind of loneliness that makes every room feel like it's shrinking. At 33, he believed he should have had more to show for his life than a stack of overdue bills and an apartment that smelled like old paint. So when he found a listing for a two-story house priced absurdly low, he didn't think twice. The photos were terrible, taken in dim light with a camera lens that looked scratched. But the bones of the house seemed solid enough. Peeling paint, broken shutters, overgrown yard. Nothing he couldn't fix. Nothing he couldn't transform. He wanted something broken so he could repair it, something abandoned so he could claim it, something forgotten so he could bring it back to life. He had no idea that the house on Graywell Lane had never really been abandoned, only avoided. The neighbors had made sure of that. The real estate agent barely looked at him when he signed the papers. She moved quickly, almost too quickly, sliding forms across the desk with the urgency of someone passing an object that burned to the touch. "You're getting a bargain," she said quietly, avoiding his eyes. "That's what I figured," Daniel replied. She hesitated, then asked a strange question. "Has anyone talked to you about the previous owner?" "No." "Should they have?" Her face stiffened. "No, not at all. The house is yours now." He didn't realize until much later that she looked relieved, as though something burdensome had just been handed over. The house greeted him with a long groan when he opened the front door. Dust curled from the floorboards like tiny ghosts escaping. Every step he took echoed through empty rooms, bouncing off cracked wallpaper and cobweb corners. It was perfect in the way abandoned places are perfect. Silent, patient, waiting. There was no furniture except a rusted metal chair in the living room and a bookshelf with no books. The kitchen cabinets were slightly open, revealing nothing but darkness inside. A faint smell of damp wood and old newspapers lingered in the air. But Daniel saw potential. New paint, new flooring, a little love, and maybe finally, a new beginning. He unpacked a sleeping bag, a toolbox, and the few possessions he'd brought from the city. The rest could come later. Tonight he wanted to listen to the quiet and imagine how the house would feel once it was his. But the quiet didn't stay for long. The first knock came at dusk. A woman stood outside, tall, with gray streaks in her dark hair, and the kind of posture that suggested she'd lived a life that demanded strength. She wore a faded green cardigan and held a glass jar of something that resembled strawberry preserves. "You must be the new owner," she said. "Daniel," he replied, shaking her hand. "Nice to meet you." "I'm Mrs. Halbrook. I live next door." She handed him the jar. "A little something to welcome you." "That's kind of you." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Not many people move into that house willingly." He tried to laugh it off. "Well, your neighbors definitely don't make it sound inviting." She didn't laugh. "If you need anything, you come straight to me. Understood?" The seriousness in her tone caught him off guard. Sure. What I mean is," she continued slowly, "if anything strange happens, don't try to handle it alone. Get help. Quickly." "Strange like what?" he asked, halfway smiling. But she didn't answer. She simply squeezed his arm once, harder than necessary, then turned around and walked back to her house. Daniel closed the door, feeling a ripple of unease he refused to acknowledge. He told himself small towns were full of superstition. He told himself rumors made houses cheap, He told himself she was being dramatic. But then the noises began. It started the second night. A faint scraping beneath the floorboards, soft tapping on the walls, a hollow thud from upstairs. Daniel assured himself that old houses made sounds. Temperature changes, settling wood, pipes expanding. He repeated logical explanations until the sounds became rhythmic, intentional. One night he followed the noises to the hallway closet. He opened the door, expecting nothing, but the moment he pulled the cord to turn on the single light bulb, a draft of cold air brushed against his face. Inside the closet, behind a stack of cracked wooden panels, he found a small door, barely big enough for a child to crawl through. He froze. A hidden passage. The metal latch was rusted but still functional. When he opened it, the smell of earth and mold spilled out. With a flashlight, he crawled inside. A tunnel ran behind the walls. He moved slowly, heartbeat loud in his ears, until the tunnel made a sharp turn and opened into a cramped little chamber beneath the staircase. But the hallway above didn't lead here. This space was completely enclosed. Someone had built this on purpose, and inside it, on the floor, was a wooden box with brass hinges. Daniel hesitated before opening it. When he finally did, he found a stack of leather-bound diaries. Some were cracked and brittle, others newer, as though added year after year. The top one was dated nearly 20 years ago. He carried the diaries upstairs and set them on the kitchen table. It felt wrong to open them, yet impossible not to. The first entry was written in a shaky hand. I have lived in this house 3 years, and every day I hear them. The neighbors pretend they don't notice, but the walls notice. They always notice. Daniel frowned. The entry made no sense. He flipped the page. Something happened here before I arrived. Something too heavy for the house to swallow. I feel it watching me at night. Page after page, the writing grew more frantic. They come to my door. They knock. They whisper. They warn. But they will not tell me what they did. Only that I must never dig in the backyard. I think they fear what I might find. Daniel paused, looking through the window toward the backyard. A patch of dry earth and weeds. Nothing unusual. Nothing suspicious. Why would anyone warn the previous owner not to dig? He kept reading. Mrs. Halbrook visits often. She brings food, but she always asks about the basement. Have you been down there? She says. You mustn't go without asking. Why does she care? Why all the questions? Daniel leaned back in his chair. The previous owner had known Mrs. Halbrook, and she'd acted strangely with him too. He turned to later entries. I can't sleep. The house is louder now. They move behind the walls. They scrape. They tap. They are angry with me. I found the tunnel today. I didn't build it. Someone else dug these walls apart long before I came. Someone desperate or trapped. Daniel felt a shiver run along his spine. He checked the timestamp on the entry, 12 years ago, and then he read the last entry in that diary. I finally understand what they did. The neighbors, all of them. They are not afraid of the house. They are afraid of him, afraid of what he might say if anyone found him. I must leave. Tonight. There were no more pages after that. No goodbye, no explanation, no details, just silence. Daniel stared at the closed diary for several minutes, trying to make sense of the cryptic warnings. He had bought the house assuming it was abandoned due to decay, not because the previous owner had fled in fear. But why had no one mentioned him? Why did everyone avoid talking about him? Why did the neighbors act like the house was infected? He turned to the second diary. This one was written by someone else entirely, someone whose handwriting was neat, careful, almost delicate. The writer never used their name. The neighbors said they would take care of the problem, but the problem is still here. They said he was gone, but I hear him. He whispers in the vents. He taps on the walls at night. He wants to be found. Daniel felt the hairs on his arms lift. I asked Mr. and Mrs. Halbrook what really happened before I moved in, but they just looked at each other. Then they told me something I will never forget. Some truths bury themselves. Let them. But it's too late. I have already seen the loose floorboard in the basement, the one they told me not to touch. I know something is underneath. Daniel exhaled slowly. The basement. He hadn't gone down yet. The entry continued. I will open it tomorrow. If I don't write again, then the neighbors lied to me. Or worse, they told me the truth. Daniel closed the diary. The next one was dated 5 years later. Entry after entry, owner after owner, the same ominous hints appeared. Strange noises, hidden spaces, neighbors who insisted everything was fine, neighbors who watched the house constantly, neighbors who seemed to fear what the house might reveal. And then, things became even more unsettling. One diary contained a crude map of the house, drawn from memory, and marked with 3 red X's. 1. Tunnel behind the wall. 2. Floorboard in the basement. 3. Old well behind the backyard fence. The previous owners had investigated the first location. Daniel had done the same. The second and third remained untouched, until now. Daniel armed himself with tools and a flashlight and headed to the basement. The stairs groaned under his weight. The air grew colder as he descended. The single bulb flickered when he pulled the chain, casting faint yellow light across the room. Dust hovered in the air like faded memories. He spotted the floorboard easily, the only one that looked newer than the others. Someone had pried it open before. Someone had closed it again. Daniel knelt and gently loosened the board. Beneath it lay a shallow pit, maybe 3 feet deep. He reached inside with the flashlight. Something metallic glimmered. He lifted it out. A small tin box. Inside were more papers, old photographs, and a key. But one photograph made his stomach twist. It showed a man, tall, smiling, standing in front of the house he now owned. The caption written on the back read, Simon Halbrook, last seen June 18th. Halbrook, the same last name as the neighbor. He turned to another photograph. It showed the same man, but this time he was standing with several people from the neighborhood. Their smiles seemed too wide, too forced. Behind them, half hidden by shadows, was the old backyard well. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. He didn't know why, not yet, but every instinct screamed that the well was the final piece of a puzzle the neighbors never wanted solved. Before he could examine anything further, someone knocked on the basement door. Not the front door, the basement door, slow, deliberate. Daniel froze. "Daniel?" called a familiar voice. "It's Mrs. Halbrook. May I come in?" He tucked the photographs and key into his pocket before climbing back upstairs. When he opened the door, Mrs. Halbrook's expression was tight, her eyes sharp. "You've been busy," she said quietly. "I'm just cleaning." Her gaze drifted down to his dirt-stained hands. "No, you've been reading." Daniel said nothing. She stepped inside without being asked. "I need to tell you something," she said, "but you must listen carefully." Daniel waited. "Nothing good ever comes from digging," she said. "Not in this house." He swallowed. "Who was Simon Halbrook?" Her jaw tightened. "My brother." "Your brother lived here?" She hesitated, then nodded. "He bought this house years ago. He was troubled. He believed the house whispered to him, believed there were secrets in the walls. He dug everywhere. Damaged floors, broke open vents, tore into places he had no right to tear. The neighbors tried to help him. We all did. But he refused to stop. And then he vanished?" Her face hardened. "He left, that's all." Daniel didn't believe her. Not anymore. "What's in the well?" he asked. The question changed her. Her posture stiffened, her eyes darkened, Her entire body seemed to brace against an invisible blow. "Nothing you need to know," she whispered. Then she stepped so close he could feel her breath. "Leave it alone," she warned. After she left, Daniel locked the door behind her. Then he packed a small bag, took his flashlight, and headed to the backyard. Whatever the neighbors were hiding, whatever they feared, he was done being part of their silence. The well was old, constructed from thick stones that had weathered over time. Moss clung to the cracks, and the wooden cover was splintered and half-rotted. When Daniel removed the cover, cold air rose from below like a sigh escaping a buried chest. He shined the flashlight down. The well wasn't dry, but it also wasn't filled with water. A ladder had been built into the stone wall, a ladder that led down into darkness, and someone had recently used it. The dust on the top rungs had been disturbed. The metal was clean where hands had touched. Daniel took a breath and started climbing down. The air grew colder. The light from above dimmed. When he reached the bottom, he found a narrow passageway dug into the earth. Another tunnel. His flashlight revealed deep scratch marks on the walls. Not animal scratches, human fingernails. Panic surged through him, but he forced himself to keep going. After walking several meters, he reached a small underground chamber. The floor was covered in dirt, but in the center lay something unnatural. A mound of old blankets and rotting fabric. A makeshift bed. Someone had lived down here. A metal tin sat beside the bedding. Daniel opened it and found a small stack of notes. The handwriting matched that of the earlier diaries. "They trapped me here. They said it was for my own good. They bring food, but they won't let me leave. Halbrook said he's sorry. I can hear them talking above. They don't know I can hear everything. The neighbors, they decided my fate." Daniel's hands trembled. Simon Halbrook hadn't been sick. He hadn't been unstable. He hadn't vanished. He had been imprisoned. By the neighbors. By his own sister. To keep some secret quiet. But what secret? Daniel turned over the last note, and his blood ran cold. "They think I killed the boy, but I didn't. I only found him. They panicked. They blamed me. They needed someone to carry the weight of their mistake. The boy's body is hidden in the walls. They put him there. They put me here." Daniel's breath caught. The neighbors had framed Simon and buried evidence inside the house. He stumbled backward, horror filling him. Then he heard footsteps approaching from behind. Slow, steady, purposeful. He turned around. Mrs. Halbrook stood at the entrance of the tunnel, blocking the way out. Behind her were two men he recognized. Neighbors who had waved at him kindly the first day he arrived. Her voice echoed through the chamber. "You should have left the past buried, Daniel." He swallowed. "Where is Simon now?" "Gone," she said. "And if you don't want to join him, you will walk away from this house. Tonight." Daniel looked at the notes clutched in his hand, looked at the tunnel, looked at the neighbors whose faces held no remorse. "No," he said quietly. "I'm not going anywhere." Mrs. Halbrook sighed. "You remind me of him," she whispered. "Too curious, too stubborn." She stepped forward. The men moved in closer. Daniel backed away, heart pounding, until his foot struck the tin box. His mind raced for anything that could protect him. Then he remembered the key in his pocket. He pulled it out. "What's that?" one man asked. Daniel didn't know, but he said the one thing that could stall them. "It opens something in the house," he said. "Something you forgot to hide." Their expressions shifted instantly. Panic, fear, recognition. And that told Daniel everything. He didn't need a weapon. He had the truth. And the truth terrified them. He shoved past them, sprinting through the tunnel, climbing the ladder 2 rungs at a time, hearing their footsteps chasing him. He ran into the house, locked every door, blocked the windows, then rushed upstairs. There was one door he hadn't opened yet. One door the diaries never mentioned. The attic. At the top of the stairs was a small locked door. The key fit perfectly. Inside the attic, dust filled the air. Broken furniture lay scattered. But at the far end, beneath a slanted beam, was a large wooden trunk. The neighbors were pounding on the front door now. He didn't have much time. He opened the trunk. Inside, wrapped in old linen, were newspaper clippings, letters, and a confession written by a trembling hand. Not Simon's. The confession described how a boy from the neighborhood had fallen through the weak floorboards of the house decades earlier. He died instantly, but instead of seeking help, the neighbors panicked, fearing they'd be blamed for leaving him unsupervised. So they hid the body, buried him inside the walls, built new panels to conceal the space, and blamed Simon, the quiet outsider, for lurking around the house. Simon found the truth. They silenced him. Daniel clutched the confession and the notes, then grabbed the diaries. This was ammunition, real, undeniable proof. The front door burst open. Footsteps thundered through the house. Daniel slipped out the back window, sprinted through the yard, and ran straight to the police station 2 streets away. The investigation lasted weeks. The diaries, the notes, the confession, every piece revealed layer after layer of guilt. The neighbors were arrested. Mrs. Halbrook was charged with unlawful imprisonment and conspiracy. The missing boy's remains were discovered exactly where the notes said they'd be, inside the wall near the staircase. The town was shaken. Daniel was questioned endlessly, thanked reluctantly, and avoided completely by those who preferred silence over justice. Simon Halbrook was never found. Some believed he escaped. Some believed he died in the tunnels. But Daniel liked to believe he fled the town and never looked back, like he himself eventually did. Daniel sold the house for exactly $1. He didn't care about profit. He cared about leaving it behind. But the truth had already followed him. Every night he dreamed of tunnels, walls, whispers, and the man who had been forgotten. The man the neighbors had turned into a monster. The man who had been buried not by earth, but by silence. And Daniel understood something he would remember for the rest of his life. Some houses are not haunted by ghosts. They are haunted by the people who live closest to them and by the secrets they would kill to protect.